January 8th, 2026 Georgetown-Scott County Planning Commission meeting. I do want to mention and welcome, we have a new commissioner with us tonight, Kristen Watts. So I want to say welcome to Georgetown. I did everything possible to get them to not see you next to Charlie, but they still did. So. Perfect. All right, with that, who was here to speak? Raise your hand. Okay. Has everybody signed in that's here to speak? Okay. Charlie, you want to swear me in?
Yeah. Everybody stand, raise your right hand, please. You swear or affirm the statement you make tonight to be the truth, to the best of your information and belief. Sure. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for your son.
Turn your mic on, baby.
Yes.
Like, there's no voice.
I know. All right. Approval of the December invoices. Any questions or discussion about them?
So moved.
Okay. Mr. Jesse?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Approval of the December 11th, 2025 minutes. Any corrections, discussion?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, moving on to the agenda, we do have a proposal to make one change to it. Under other business, the Georgetown Commons Master Sign Plan Amendment, to move it up to old business and have it as the first item. That way, Mr. Woodall can go ahead and leave, since it should be a fairly short discussion compared maybe to the other two items on the agenda. Any concerns with that?
No.
All right, a motion to approve the agenda with that change?
So moved.
Okay. Mr. Black, motion, and who said, was that you, Mr.
Yeah.
Jesse?
Yeah.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Items for postponement, we did have one item that was postponed, the stables at Blossom Park, so I think the word got out ahead of time, but if there's anybody here for that, we're not going to hear that tonight. Anything else?
The item on the board is still kind of floating out there. It's one that did not make the agenda.
Okay.
The clerical error.
Okay.
So that's the other one that is up.
The Live Smart Studio Hotel? All right. Okay, with that,
is.
I think we're ready to
When is
move
that?
on to Mr. Woodall and Holden,
Okay.
the Georgetown Commons Master Sign Plan Amendment.
Commissioners, I'll try to be brief on this. What we have here is basically a continuation of action that was taken at the end of 2024 when the Georgetown Commons project received a preliminary approval. As a part of that preliminary approval, a master sign plan was adopted that had a number of signs for the development. One such sign was a 25-foot pole sign indicated as sign number 3 on the original master sign plan. Essentially, what we're here to consider today is a variance to allow that sign to go up to 35 feet. The applicants have submitted a number of sightline reviews that indicate that with the topography of the area at 25 feet, you can't see that sign until you're past the turn lane to enter into the development. And so what we're looking at here is allowing the sign to go up to 35 feet, which would be the minimum variance necessary for relief, to allow that sign to be seen from a little bit further back. And in doing that, the other thing they're going to do is they're going to go from a 1/1 sign to a side-by-side, giving, I guess, equal billing to the tenants there, and then also allowing the sign to be a little bit shorter and still see the bottom of it. What staff has recommended in this particular case is to grant the applicant's variance, and in doing so, though, cap them to be the top of the sign no greater than 915 feet above sea level. And essentially, the reason why we've worded it like this is the applicant has a lot of work to do out there, a lot of ground to move, a lot of dirt to push around. And so whether or not they want to accomplish the height of that sign by making the pole taller or putting a mound underneath it or some other mechanism to increase that height, we're mostly concerned with just that having that minimum allowable relief. And so in this case, that's either a 35-foot sign or just going up to 915 in elevation. And then the applicant is here, the representative. Otherwise, staff would be happy to answer any questions on this particular proposal.
Any questions from the commission? Mr. Woodall?
Thank you. John Woodall on behalf of the applicant, and I know you all heard about this at workshop, and I wish I could provide better color than Mr. Fleming, but I can't. That's exactly right. The only reason we're asking for this is just because of the topography of the site. And this particular area where the sign's going sits way down below the road. That's it.
Any question for the applicant?
And we're willing to accept the conditions imposed by staff.
Any questions? Okay. Anyone have a motion?
I make a motion to accept the sign.
Second.
All right. Tristan?
Yay.
Jessica?
Yes.
Harold Dean?
Yes.
David Best?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Garrett?
Yes.
Brad Green?
Yes.
Melissa's not here. And the chair votes yes. Okay, motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to PDP 2023-10, Scott County Humane Society, variance from Article 6.14 of Landscape and Land Use Buffer Ordinance.
Hi, good evening. It's good to be here tonight. So, Scott County Humane Society, PDP 2023-10. It's a proposal for relief from or reduction of the requirements of Article 6.14 of the Landscape and Land Use Buffer Ordinance. It's also a change in approved site conditions pertaining to PDP 2023-10. The location is 1376 Lexington Road. It is immediately south of the city limits along Lexington. Site acreage is 4.52 acres. The zone is A1. Surrounding zones are also A1. And the proposed use is an animal shelter. It is a previously approved conditional use permit in the A1. Those permit applications are numbered S 2020-10 and S 2025-10, pursuant to Article 412F of the zoning ordinance. So you can see here on our zoning map, that is the site. You can see Lexington Road to the west. You can also see those property boundaries where the applicant is requesting relief to the north and to the west there where it has frontage on Lexington Road. This is a different layer provided by staff. Outlined in yellow is the property boundaries from which upon which the applicant requests relief from this article. So some unique contextual factors and background for this application. Typically things that are lower scale in nature like this do not generally appear before Planning Commission. But this case comes before the commission as a result of a previous motion by the Scott County Board of Adjustment. You can read the language of the motion there for yourself, but it essentially deferred any discussion or approval of fencing to the development plan. So that's why this comes back before the commission as a amendment to the existing development plan. So the applicant has appeared before the Scott County Board of Adjustment twice for this site, and they have also appeared before the Planning Commission once for the preliminary development plan. The first appearance was the initial request for a conditional use permit for the operation of a new adoption center upon the A1 zoned property, and it was pursuant to Article 412F of the zoning ordinance. The initial conditional use permit was granted in 2020, and the granting of the initial conditional use permit also entailed a variance for the reduction in the minimum A1 side yard setback from 50 to 35 feet. So as conditioned on the initial use permit approval, the applicant brought a preliminary development plan before the Planning Commission Board in 2023, which was approved. The preliminary development plan also indicated fencing within the property lines within which the animals would be kept. That is relevant later as we examine the boundary fencing. And the applicant also reappeared before the Scott County Board of Adjustment in spring of this past year with changes to the initially approved conditions for the 2020 application. The applicant was granted approval for this as well, and the expanded conditional use entailed the following changes. It entailed an expansion of operating hours from Monday through Sunday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., and it also entailed the overnight housing of up to 4 dogs. So conditions of approval for the permit do exist. They were included on the preliminary development plan. They were attached to the conditional use permit, both in 2020 and 25. Many of these are intended to limit the effects that the overnight housing of dogs on the property may have on the surrounding area. And the final development plan has been approved by both the commission and staff. So perimeter fencing requirements have been discussed. They've been kind of a subject of intense discussion in previous hearings. It was discussed since the initial conditional use permit was considered by the Scott County Board of Adjustment, but it was not ever enacted or enforced because the Article 4 perimeter fencing was not implemented until 2024. So in 2023, it was noted that there were no local ordinances which would require buffering or fencing between the two properties in the A1 zone. Planning Commission had heard and recommended approval of the text amendment of Article 6.14, but at that time, it had not yet been formally adopted by legislative bodies. So the text amendment was implemented before the final development plan for the site was approved. And because of that timing, this application is now held to the requirements of the article of the landscape and land use buffer ordinance. It is also worth considering, staff finds that it's worth considering, that the implementation of this article was put in prior to the expansion of the conditional use permit that was approved by the Scott County Board of Adjustment. So conditions of the use were significantly altered subsequent to the implementation of 6.14. So the only facet of the development plan that is materially different in relation to the previously approved preliminary development plan is the boundary fencing requirement. All other conditions regarding the site have no material change. So staff analysis will exclusively focus on the current request. So, staff finds that there are 2 primary articles from which the applicant requests relief. The first is Article 6.14, as discussed previously. The developer shall construct a 6-foot minimum height fence of diamond mesh wire or equivalent no-climb wire. If an existing tree line is present, then adequate measures shall be required to remove the vegetation to place the fence on the property boundary line. The cost of the fence installation shall be at the expense of the developer, and such fencing shall be required for all parcels adjoining A1 zone land, regardless of the property's zone, when there is an approved change of use, either through the conditional use or variances or waivers to a use other than agricultural or single-family residential use. Because the conditional use permit for the site has been expanded since the implementation of Article 6.14, staff does find that any potential approval of this application would also grant relief from Article 220 of the Landscape and Use Buffer Ordinance, which states that no use shall be increased in intensity unless the minimum landscaping required by the provision of this article is provided for the property. So the property abuts A1 zone parcels on all sides. So the site technically does require new 6-foot tall boundary fencing to the letter of 6.14 on all boundaries. The relief requested by the applicant is to omit the required boundary fencing to the north and west property lines, as there are already existing fence lines upon those boundaries. The existing fence lines in question are approximately 4.5 to 5 feet in height, with a 4-plank fence to the west and a wire mesh fence to the north. The applicant intends to add new fencing to the south and east property lines that will connect to the existing fence lines at convergence points or fence posts. The requested relief from standards is that the existing fencing to the north and west boundaries do not meet the explicit requirements of the article. So provided by staff here, this was done on a recent site visit. You can see the east and south property lines where the parcel does abut an active agricultural use. And you can kind of visualize here where the 6-foot-tall diamond-dimensional no-climb boundary fence would be implemented, and it would connect to the existing fence line here. And you can't see it in the picture, but it would also connect over to the northwest. This is also some visual aids provided by staff of measurements of the existing fence lines. You can see this is the fence line to the west, and that was measured at around 55 inches in height, or 4.5 feet. You can also see the existing northern boundary fencing measured by staff on site visits, roughly 52 to 54 inches, or 4.3 to 4.5 feet in height. So we'll kind of start with examining the conditions to the north and the northern fence line. There's an existing tree and fence line to the north boundary where the parcel abuts Central Kentucky Pet Resort at 1364. It similarly functions as an animal boarding facility under a conditional use permit. The applicant has stated that this existing tree and fence line already serves as a buffer between the two properties or uses. And staff does make the finding that the existing tree and fence line meets the intent of Article 6.14, which is to prevent potential disturbance to A1 districts or uses. So staff makes two primary findings regarding relief from the article in relation to the north property. Despite the A1 zoning, the parcel to the north does not actually operate as an agricultural use. It's a conditional use that does not explicitly fall under the designation of an agricultural use as defined in section 2.1, just the definition sections of our zoning ordinance. Because the north parcel's conditional use permit would become null and void upon sale or transfer of that property, which does give it the potential to return to a agricultural use. Staff does find that it remains critical to protect any potential disturbances to this property. Staff also find that the existing tree and fence line to the north meet the essential intent of Article 6.14 in the sense that it would shield any sort of disturbance or intrusion that this Humane Society operations may have upon the abutting parcel to the north. This is further supported by the fact that the existing fence is approximately 4.5 to 5 feet in height, at most 1.5 feet short of the prescribed 6-foot requirement. The material of the northern fence, which is wire and mesh, would adequately prevent the crossing of boundaries by any animals. Staff posits that the existing northern fence line will protect the northern property from disturbance, both regarding its current use and potential future agricultural uses. So these are more photos, kind of visual aids provided by staff on a site visit. And as you can see, there are kind of two primary takeaways from these visuals here. The first is that the existing foliage is very thick, it is very dense. This was done in winter, and staff does kind of assert that in summer it would provide even more of a buffer, but even as it is in the winter, it provides plenty. The second major takeaway is that this northern fence does require repair, and staff does recommend a condition of approval to ensure that that does happen. Seen here, another picture provided by staff from site visit. You can see again that the existing fence line does require further repair. That is the post to the northeast of the property. And again, staff does advise that condition of approval that this fence line is repaired. So the applicant also requests relief regarding the western property boundary, and this boundary is where the parcel has frontage upon Lexington Road. Somewhat similar to the north property line, this abutting parcel has A1 zoning designation, but it is not an active agricultural use under 2.1 of the zoning ordinance. It is essentially just the right-of-way for Lexington Road. It falls under A1 designation just because it is a state road, is US 25 outside of the city limits. So the fencing required by the article, if placed to this western adjacent property, would not be protecting an active agricultural use. It would be somewhat unnecessary, at least as far as staff findings. So the boundary fence to the west would be kind of an excessive measure to protect an A1 district that will never foreseeably be put to an agricultural use. I don't think Lexington Road is going to be going anywhere. The western fence is also approximately 4.5 to 5 feet in height. For the purposes of protecting surrounding zones, it does serve the same purpose as the 6-foot tall fence required by Article 614. Staff posits that the existing fence lines to the north and west meet the spirit and intent of the article, which is to protect agricultural zones or uses from forms of disturbance. Furthermore, the tree line to the north provides visual shielding, buffer, and protection between the Humane Society's use and the north parcel, both in its current conditional use and for any potential future agricultural uses. So seen here, more photos from staff site visit. It's the existing 4-plank fence to the west property line facing Lexington Road or US 25. So granting relief from Article 6.14 will not threaten the public health, safety, or welfare. The existing fence and buffers from the north and west properties, although it is not to the letter of the ordinance, does protect surrounding areas. The staff posits that the existing fence and tree lines annul any potential threat that the Humane Society's use may pose. For the same reason, it will not alter or threaten the character of the general vicinity. Staff finds that the granting of relief from this article will not allow an unreasonable circumvention of the requirements of the zoning regulations for 2 primary reasons. Firstly, the required fence to the south and east property lines will still be erected in pursuance to the exact language of the ordinance, and it is important to keep in mind that that south and east property line is where the parcel actually abuts active agricultural uses as defined by Section 2.1 of the ordinance. Secondly, the existing 4.5, 5-foot tall, ranging from 4.5 to 5 feet, fence lines to the north and west, contingent on proper maintenance, will serve the same essential intended purpose, Article 6.14, which is to protect abutting agricultural zones. Staff find that while this variance is a circumvention of zoning standards, it is not to an unreasonable degree. So special circumstances do apply to this site in the sense that the fencing requirement arises from the requirements of a conditional use or the language of the article. And similarly, the timeline in which the text amendment was implemented may constitute a unique circumstance in the sense that the applicant may not have been fully aware of this requirement, and it was very unique circumstances in terms of how the timeline for when the text amendment went through. So while financial circumstances in relation to the expense of bearing the full cost of new fencing is not to be considered, staff does find that the strict application of the article would create 3 different forms of hardship. Firstly, the full implementation of a 6-foot tall diamond fence does create unnecessary hardship, as existing fence lines to the north and west, each being 4.5 to 5 feet in height, already meet the intent of such a standard. Secondly, the article from which the applicant seeks relief was not imposed until the very end of their final development plan approval, 4 years after the initial conditional use permit was granted. While unawareness of the requirement does not absolve responsibility to adhere to it, staff does find that it constitutes a level of hardship, as the applicant would have purchased, planned, and applied for the use of this parcel without being fully aware of the strict buffer standard to which it would be held. And lastly, the article requires that if an existing tree line is present, then adequate measures shall be required to remove the vegetation to place the fence on the property boundary line. And staff does find that the removal, reduction, or clearing of the existing tree line to the north to enable the erection of the new fence would be counterintuitive and unnecessary because the tree line itself does already provide that buffering in itself alongside the existing fence. The applicant has stated that this is one thing that's important to note, is that the animals will not be running against this fence line, this boundary perimeter fence line, as the applicant has stated that all dogs housed on the property would be kept within the fenced 40 by 100 foot animal exercise area noted on the development plan. The fenced exercise area will have evergreen vegetation screening, so it does have another level of privacy to limit disturbance to surrounding areas. And in relation to relief from boundary fencing requirements, it is worth consideration that when dogs are outside, they will be in this inner fencing ring rather than running against the perimeter fencing. And staff does recommend a condition of approval to confirm this as a reality for the site. So included here, kind of a copy of the preliminary development plan tailored to provide a visual aid for this existing, well, for what will become the interior fence line. You can see here, to the west and to the north, the two property lines where they're requesting relief or reduction of the standards of the article. And in purple here, you can see the 40 by 100 foot fenced dog exercise area with evergreen screening. And that will be enforced as a condition of their development plan that was approved. So findings, project is a 4.52 acre A1 zone parcel. The variance entails a departure or relief from both Article 220 and Article 6.14 of the Landscape and Land Use Buffer Ordinance. While the existing fence lines to the north and west property lines do not meet the explicit requirement of the article, the existing fence and buffer lines meet the general spirit and intent of the article in the sense that it effectively shields any potential disturbances to adjacent properties, and it is not unreasonably short of the prescribed height of 6 feet. So while the article does explicitly state that the 6-foot boundary fencing will be required for all non-A1 or residential use parcels adjoining A1 zoned land, rather than when adjoining agricultural uses, staff does posit that the relief from the article may be considered in relation to the fact that the north and west properties do not fall under active agricultural use as defined by Section 2 of the ordinance. 5, the application meets the requirements of KRS 102.43 pertaining to relief from zoning standards. Up to this point, the applicant has complied with the previous conditions of approval for all conditional use permits and the preliminary development plan, many of which were intended similarly to Article 6.14 in that they are tailored to limit the disturbance of the current use to the surrounding agricultural areas. The existing conditional use permit for the site retains all these restrictions, and it is intended for the same purpose of protecting surrounding agricultural land. The adjoining parcels to the north and west, while under A1 designation, are not active agricultural uses as defined by the ordinance. While it remains critical to protect all surrounding land from the potential effects of this use, such strict application of the text of 6.14 may create hardship and may not be entirely necessary as it pertains to non-agricultural uses. And lastly, as noted on the development plan, animals on the site are intended to be kept within the inner fence line attached to the primary structure. They will not have free rein over the whole parcel. So recommendation, given findings and analysis, staff recommends approval of the request pertaining to PDP 2023-10 for relief from Article 6.14 and 2.20 of the Landscape and Land Use Buffer Ordinance on the basis that it satisfies the general and spirit and intent of the standards from which relief is sought. Should the commission approve the application, staff recommend the following conditions of approval. We have our standard conditions of approval. This property is subject to all requirements of the Georgetown-Scott County zoning ordinance and the subdivision and development regulations. The applicant shall comply with all requirements of other federal, state, and local regulatory entities. The applicant shall provide copies to the Board of Adjustment of all permits issued on behalf of the applicant as a result of this approval, including, but not limited to, business-related certifications, licenses, regulatory permits, and any recertification when required. The applicant shall obtain a building permit from Building Inspection Office prior to any construction. The applicant shall return to the Commission Board prior to any changes in the approved conditions, specifically pertaining to the development plan and fencing. The site remains subject to all previously recorded conditions of approval for S 2025-10, S 2020-39, and PDP 2023-10. Any further changes or variances pertaining to fencing or the development plan will return to the Planning Commission. Any changes to the conditional use permit will return to the Scott County Board of Adjustment. The conditional use permit, as previously established, becomes null and void upon sale or transfer of the project site. The existing fence and tree line to the north must be repaired and otherwise maintained by the applicant to ensure that it remains as an effective buffer to the north. The existing fence line to the west must also be effectively maintained by the applicant. The new fence lines to the south and east property lines must meet the explicit requirements of the article and must effectively connect to the existing fence lines in a manner that completely encloses the subject property. When going outside, all dogs housed on the property must stay within the inner 40 by 100 foot privacy fence as noted in the preliminary development plan. In the event where any animals do utilize the larger area of the site, they must be harness property and monitored under the Humane Society staff supervision. That is all for the report. Staff can now take any questions that the commission may have for the application.
I have a question about the fence that needs to be repaired.
Yes, sir.
Will that be done before they actually build the facility, or is that come after the fence that you reference here?
So as staff, when drafting that condition of approval, I did not have a specific timeline in mind. We can amend the language of that requirement to specify the timeline. They are under construction for what was approved in their final development plan. But if we may condition, as the commission sees fit, we may condition it so that before they begin full use of the site, that must be put in place and it must be effective.
So it couldn't be used until that's done, correct?
If I may, Commissioner Jesse, in this circumstance, as a condition of approval for this development, the expectation is they would meet all of their conditions prior to operation.
Okay.
And so what that exact timeline would look like, there could be a little bit of flexibility in that, but before operation, all conditions would need to be met.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the commission?
Is there a tentative date for that to happen there?
The applicant may speak to that. Is the applicant here?
Let's wait and see if there are any, we can table
Okay.
that question if there are any other questions. Any other questions from the commission?
Just out of curiosity, is this going to be a second facility for the Humane Society, or is this replacing your all's existing location?
It's replacing the existing facility.
So the one off Long Lick isn't going to be there anymore?
That is the animal shelter. in
Okay.
Scott County.
Okay.
The Humane Society is currently in Indian Acres.
Okay, glad I asked then. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? This was your first application, right?
Yes,
You
ma'am.
did a good job.
Thank you.
All right, applicant, I'm sorry, Holden, did you have something to say?
I would just like to add that as we look to hear from the applicant, normally a question staff gets is, have we heard from any members of the public?
Yeah.
In this circumstance, we have. We've heard from one, Mr. Roger Quarles. He had submitted a letter, and we've provided that to each of the commissioners for your review. It goes over a number of questions and concerns, and ultimately, if you guys would like to discuss that with staff or the applicant, we'd encourage that as well.
Okay.
So the one question where it says, Mr. Quarles says the dogs already got in there from the existing animal shelter. Has that been addressed, or is that?
So this is, the neighboring use is a dog boarding facility. He had expressed that at some point, animals from that operation had got onto his property. In this circumstance, I think that's why it's so important to maintain that increased fencing requirement there to the, I guess that would be the east and south, looking at Noah over here. But that increased buffering for the east and south, those are the fence lines that abut Mr. Quarles' property and will be built to the standards within the landscape and land use buffer. As far as the other use and how the dogs are getting out there, staff would be happy to look into that, but we do believe that's separate from this specific maybe application. But the fear is the same, because whether they're getting to his property from the property next door or from this property, that's a problem. So we want to prevent it from this one.
Or they could just be stray dogs from somewhere else.
Yeah. I don't know.
But that's just it. A fence is made to keep stuff out, and keep stuff in. That's, that's why, that's what we gotta look at. You have two dog facilities side by side. If there's a problem with either one, they're gonna eventually end up either on the road or somewhere without some kind of fencing. And if you have to repair, my personal opinion is it costs the same to repair it as it does to put up new, basically. That's just me.
Thank you very much.
Does the applicant want to speak?
Good evening. My name's Alex Cantrell. I'm a board member with the Scott County Humane Society, and this is Cassie Ernst with me. She is on our building committee. I would say first, we believe this variance requested meets the intent of the ordinance. Second to that, if I could address Mr. Vest's comment, let me say first, so we believe it meets the intent, but second, aesthetically, it makes a lot of sense to keep that tree line there. It also, having that 4-plank fence facing 25 makes a lot of sense. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here because we've been before the Board of Adjustments previously with our neighbor to the south. Part of the problem is noise coming from the pet resort. And so if we erected that fence along that boundary line, we would be required to then remove some of that tree line, which would really affect the noise. Also, from the Humane Society's perspective, we want as much buffer for that noise as well because they could be negatively affecting us. I believe that's, any other
There was
questions?
one question, I think,
Start date.
about the start date.
Yeah, just to answer again, what we had talked about with planning and zoning related to the site development plan for any fencing would be by occupancy, which makes a lot of sense. Right now, we're targeting June of 2026. So again, we're well under construction, foundations are done, underground plumbing, maybe pouring concrete next week, so very much underway. The other one that I want to make clear, because again, Noah mentioned it, that we have some extreme conditions on our conditional use. One of which, for the overnight housing of dogs, is it is explicitly not to become a primary function of the facility. So that is a very strict requirement on our existing conditional use. It's intended for respite care in the event, lots of reasons, but that's a very unique difference, I think, in the two functions between where we are and the neighbor to the north for the pet resort. So a little bit different, similar, but just want to make sure that you guys understand that that was a requirement for the Board of Adjustment.
At the pet resort next door, and Holden had mentioned maybe that's something that we need to follow up on separate from this. Wouldn't they be required to be part of this new fence or repairing the fence, or don't they have some responsibility as well?
Legally, yes, they do. I mean, there is a Kentucky statute that requires boundary line fences to cost to be split by both adjoining properties. That's not something we have discussed.
Okay. But Holden, we do have some kind of mechanism in place where we can let them know they're going to have to maintain that fence, is that right?
So in this circumstance, as we've applied it in the past, because this is the applicant in front of this body at this time, the burden of the development will fall on this applicant. And so the expectation is from staff's perspective, they will repair the entire fence in line with those conditions. Moving forward, yes, it would be between the applicant and the adjoining property owner to work on that maintenance together. But they're the ones requesting this use, they're the ones requesting this development plan. And so it is their responsibility from staff's perspective to meet our conditions up front.
And I mean, I think we would have legal remedies to enforce splitting payment of that fence on the boundary line if necessary.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioner for the applicant? All right, is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak? No one? All right, is there a motion?
Would it be two motions?
I think just one motion, correct? Yeah.
I think so too.
Two motions on the next one.
But I think you're right. I think just did one. I make a motion that we approve PDP 2023-10
Okay,
based on staff recommendations.
so a motion has been made by Mr. Garrett. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Stone? All right. Mr. Vest?
No.
Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Garrett?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Ms. Canfield?
Yes.
Mr. Jesse?
Yes.
All right, and the chair, or chair, Mr. Black?
Yes.
All right, motion carries.
Oh, I'll be gonna make sure.
I know, it's what I get for going out of order, trying to mix it up.
Save best for last.
I'm sorry?
Do those have Mr. Black?
Uh-huh. Yep, I just decided to mix it up this time, and I didn't go back up.
Good.
All right. Next, PSP 2025-37, and to your point, Mr. Green, this is the one that we have a subdivision plat and a development plan, so it will require 2 points of action.
Okay,
Okay,
I'm gonna give a second for everybody to clear, if you don't mind.
yep.
All right, so this is, as Chairwoman Singer has stated, this is a two-part application, so PDP 2025-67 and then PSP 2025-68. The PDP is for the development of a mixed housing type residential area with townhomes, single-family detached apartments, as well as open space in a community center. And then the PSP is for the creation of the 91 single-family detached residential lots, the 4 multifamily residential lots, 1 community center lot, 4 open space lots, and I believe 2 floodplain lots, located at 1341 Cincinnati Pike. This is internal to the neighborhood, so while it has a Cincinnati Pike address, it does not have direct frontage on a Cincinnati Pike anymore by action of development of the site. This is a 68.67 acre parcel, presently zoned C1 and R2 PUD. It adjoins A1 to the north and south, C1 to the east, and R1C PUD. And they, as I've stated, have kind of addressed the proposed use, which that being a mixed housing type development, and then the access being the 3 existing roads in the Woodland Park neighborhood that ultimately access Cincinnati Pike directly. This is the site as it stands, and this is the zoning for the property. So that darker, more dandelion yellow being the R2 zone, and then that kind of cream, buttercream color being the R1C zone. And then the blue area is the C1 zone, required for all floodplain areas and areas of environmental sensitivity. So to set a little bit of context on the neighborhood as a whole, in 2017-2018, a rezoning application was filed and approved by the Planning Commission Board and the Georgetown City Council from A1 to R1C and C1. It was at that point in time, it was 122 acres. It was annexed in, it became under city domain,
And in 2018, the lots for phases 1 and 2 were approved by the Planning Commission Board, ultimately in total having 224 single-family detached units in that area, as well as some buffering requirements and some HOA detention areas, some open space areas throughout that. In July of 2025, the applicant came before the Planning Commission Board for the 68.67 acre remainder, so what would have been phases 3 and onwards, to rezone the site from R1C PUD to R2 PUD. The application was recommended in favor of by the Planning Commission Board, was sent to the city of Georgetown as it is in their jurisdiction, and they are the respective body that would be reviewing the rezoning application. After review of that, after submittal of everything, and pursuant to state statute KRS 100.211, after the required 90 days for legislative body consideration, the recommendation of the Planning Commission was ultimately finalized in October of 2015. And this application is to kind of execute that rezoning and then the proposed or the included concept plan. This is their concept for general reference and to kind of refresh everybody. And this is a brief kind of statement on the record. At the zoning map amendment, which the minutes I've included in your packets, the public hearing had several items of discussion, including but not limited to school connectivity, housing typology, open space and trails, and a submitted traffic study. And this is the same chart that was included in the staff report, just articulating the impact on the local traffic and the traffic flow patterns and everything like that that would be expected if this property was rezoned, which was submitted per our regulations regarding rezoning applications. This is kind of the breakdown of what the access looks like in this area. So when they were reviewing it, we were looking a lot at accessibility, making sure that the roads could handle what was coming in and everything like that. They proposed the extension of 3 existing roads and some additional new roads to the site and through the site that ultimately will, again, reconnect to Birdseye or Rattler, which both have direct access onto Cincinnati Pike. The conditions of approval are on this slide here. There were 7 included with the application, and the ones of note that most pertain to the preliminary development plan and preliminary subdivision plat are condition 4, condition 5, and condition 7, all of which, or condition 4 and condition 7, which reference the number of residential units and housing typologies, and condition 5, setting the expectations for open space. So when we reviewed it, we reviewed against our language. We also reviewed against their conditions of approval that came with it. And while the other ones matter just as much as this one does, those ones are kind of the unique call-outs that you wouldn't often see in a zone change application. That's why I wanted to bring them to your guys' attention. This is their preliminary development plan, and their preliminary development plan is a replica of their their concept plan submitted at the July Planning Commission meeting. And then they've also submitted their subdivision plat. For reference in your guys' kind of 11 by 17s, the full site preliminary development plan is the first one, and then the last 11 by 17 is the preliminary subdivision plat. So if you guys are looking and kind of curious about what am I referencing, those are the 2 that we have. I've used this here and kind of color coordinated accordingly to identify the 5 kind of different land uses in this area. We have in orange the single family detached, in pink across 2 different locations we have the townhomes, in a darker blue we have the apartments, the green, there are 3 green spots are the identified areas that they'd like to credit as usable open space, and then that kind of aqua color is the floodplain. This is a planned unit development, similar to its previous phases and to many other new developments we see throughout the community. PUDs are a non-Euclidean route towards land use management that promote the creation of open spaces, mixed area housing, or mixed use housing and land uses, environmental protection, developmental flexibility, while considering their existing base zone. So the uses and density of the zone, the R2 zone, are going to still be applicable, but it's how that uses, or how those those units are allocated and what those look like. That is what the PUD kind of allows for some flexibility on. Oftentimes in exchange for a public benefit. In this instance, and in most instances, we see it in a public and shared common open use spaces. However, in other communities across the nation, PUDs can exchange for different things, or can get different things, or can kind of balance different things out to have that communal benefit to it. All of the uses proposed in the preliminary development plan are permitted uses within the R2 zone, and the proposed plan has an overall density of 9.26 dwelling units per net acre development, which is less than the standard 12 dwelling units per acre as set forth by the base zone of the property. And as I've stated several times through, a planned development project may depart from literal conformance with the area and dimension regulations in exchange for that public benefit component, which I've broken down into the 3 colors, which ties to the previous presentation slides for the single-family detached, the townhomes, and the apartments. Single-family detached is requesting 5 different waivers, townhomes are requesting 3, and apartments are requesting 4 waivers. Does anybody have any questions before I get into that?
I forgot to mention ahead of time that we did have a corrected packet.
We did have a corrected packet. Thank you for calling that out. As we approach and kind of discuss the details of each section, those corrections are going to be kind of applicable for most specifically the townhome areas for parking calculations, the apartment for parking calculations, and then much later in the conversation, it will also pertain to a condition of approval, just a language clarification that we agreed with the applicant to do.
So the 88 parking space, you've resolved that?
We have
question?
resolved that issue. I will get into that when we approach that section
All
of
right, thank you.
of the presentation. So our single-family detached areas highlighted in orange are along the north boundary as well as a portion of the southern boundary, the north being a larger farm operation and the south being the Ann Mason Royal Springs school site. They request several waivers associated with the lot kind of layout, specifically from lot width from 70 to 55, lot area from 7,500 to 6,000, the front yard setbacks from 30 to 25 for single frontage and 30 to 20 for double frontage lots, and the rear yard setbacks from 25 to 20 feet. I've kind of included here, but I will just kind of call your attention to it. This is an excerpt from the finalized and recorded plat for phases 1 and 2, identifying the various widths, setbacks, and other factors and components. The zone at the time, you would have needed a side yard setback variance, but because the R2 zone already has that variance in their consideration, that is not requested at this point because it is a by right side yard setback. So again, this is what they're proposing previously, and this is what they're proposing to continue. All of these variances are requested in the interest of having consistent housing sizes, lot sizes and yards, and separation between units. And staff does advise that those waivers do be granted for that consistency and character of the residential neighborhood. I will note, as we're kind of standing here, that I did pull one of the conditions, one of the requested waivers for the single-family detached, because it does not really have to do with the lots themselves. It more so has to do with the required landscaping that we'll be looking into, and I will address that at a later point in the presentation. Our 2 townhome areas are identified in pink, one being centrally located and one on the south side between the proposed apartments, kind of at this junction of all of 3 large land uses. The apartments, the single family, detached, floodplain, and then that community open space area. So the north townhomes are identified here. They are requesting a front yard setback variance identical to that of the single family detached, and the rear yard setback variance is for the same purpose. Staff also advises in favor of it for that interest in keeping that consistent character. The number of units in the buildings and the parking allocations do meet our expectations and requirements of the ordinance. I do want to point out that the north townhome areas do have a open space area, which I've identified in green. That is one of the areas that they'd like to credit for their development required minimum open space of 10%. I will also get into that in a moment when we do the larger conversation about the open space requirements. In the south, they request the same variances as the north side. I did pull one of their, not a variance, a waiver. I did pull the one requested item for the same reason that I pulled it from the single family, specifically for that agricultural adjoining requirement. Again, we will discuss that in a moment, but I just wanted to point that out for everybody. Staff also advises in favor of the requests, again, for that interest in consistency in neighborhood design and cohesion. Our apartment area is kind of south central to the site. It would adjoin an existing kind of platted portion of the neighborhood and would be kind of shielded from the north and south by single-family and at times multifamily townhome areas. The apartments request several variances. The first two are, again, for the consistency or for the intent and consistency with having the front yard setback and rear yard setback to match the other areas so that we kind of have that kind of natural framing and everything like that. They've also requested a waiver from the number of units per building from 6 per building to 24 per building, and the number of building stories from 2 to 3. When we're speaking about the, let me find where I am in my presentation. You have to give me a second. The waiver for the number of units per building is a typical waiver we see for these types of areas. The 6 units per building is a little bit more of an antiquated way for building apartments, and in the interest of using space more efficiently, they'd like to put more units under one roof so that they do not have as much kind of vacant land that isn't really being utilized to its maximum potential. And then it also allows for them to have that kind of open space pocket throughout it where they can have more separation, they can dedicate more green space and have those options available. And staff advises in favor of granting that waiver request for that interest. It is the similar reason as to why they've requested that building story request, the number of stories in a building. The ordinance states that if you'd like to increase the height of a building, you need to increase your side yard setback. As a triple frontage lot, it's reasonable to ascertain that the west side yard, or the west kind of boundary is that side yard and also rear yard area. And in that instance, if it was considered a side yard, the distance from the property line, specifically here to the buildings here, does meet that additional separation requirement where that's one additional vertical or horizontal foot away from the property line equals one additional vertical increase up until, I believe 50 feet is the maximum set. As I've stated with the number of units in a building, they've requested to have that additional stories so that they can have fewer buildings taking up less space, having less impervious area, allowing for them to have green space available for residents of the area alike, and just allowing for them to not have to take up as much space for other features and everything like that. Staff does advise in favor of that request. I did miss it in my townhome thing, so I'm going to finish up my apartments and then I will step back to townhomes briefly to speak about the parking situation. But in the previous report, it had mentioned that they had a deficit in the number of parking spaces by approximately 80 parking spaces. In our zoning ordinance and in our subdivision regulations, there's kind of 2 mechanisms advised for how you can calculate it. The subdivision ordinance contains one type and the zoning ordinance contains another. When you're looking at the 1-bedroom units, they're the same, but when you're looking at the 2-bedroom units, they're different. So the ratio is for every 2-bedroom or more, you have 2 parking spaces, and they meet that requirement. Staff advises that be, after reviewing it and everything like that, that be the regulation that we take forward. It is our most recently updated regulation, and it is more consistent with the ITE parking generation manual standards set forth for off-street parking. Yes, Commissioner
So,
Green.
are you saying like, so a 1-bedroom would only have to have 1 parking space?
I'm sorry, it is, I believe it is actually.
1.5.
1.5, thank
Okay.
you, yes.
And I'll also defer to the applicant on this because we've had a pretty lengthy discussion of how they calculated and why they wanted as many parking spaces that they had. And so if we could defer those questions to the applicant.
Okay. I will step back to the South Townhomes very briefly, just to state that this was the other area where the staff report had been amended. In this instance, they are proposing a, I believe it is 3-bedroom units, and per the zoning ordinance, it would only require 2 spaces for that, and per the subdivision regulation, I believe it is 2.5. And staff advises for the same reason of of the apartments, one of allowing for that kind of reduced impervious area that we consider the zoning ordinance regulations as they are the more recently adopted and amended ones, and as it aligns with the standards set forth by the EIT parking generation manual.
And that's what's underlined here?
That is what's
in the new
underlined
report?
on pages 6 to 7,
And 8?
and then 8, yes. While we're at a natural pause point, do we have anything or any questions? Okay. Staff took the liberty of calculating the percent of housing type for phases. As you may recall, I believe it is condition 7 of their zoning map amendment. They keep at or under 70% of one housing typology. Staff summarized everything together and identified that 62.3% of the housing types are of one type, and then the distribution is pretty kind of vary beyond that point. So it does satisfy that condition of approval. Staff also identified for all phases of development, if this is ultimately approved by the Planning Commission Board, what that distribution of housing typologies would look like for the neighborhood and how that kind of change, how that is going to be executed. I've kept consistent colors throughout, so blue is the apartments, pink is the townhome, and orange is the single-family detached. So while we are adding some different housing typologies, this is still, statistically speaking, a majority single-family detached structure neighborhood. The single-family detached structures are framing and kind of buffering the apartments from one another, from adjoining property owners, and just kind of naturally kind of having that single-family essence retained, again, in addition to that existing phases 1 and 2 of the development. Moving onwards, we have some dedicated open space as well. I just called out the floodplain. They have identified open space 1, which is located as this area here. As I'll get momentarily into this community center component, but this is kind of crossing the floodplain to get to the park space 1. As part of the development, as part of the conditions of approval, staff advises that to make this usable, we will need a low flow crossing of the dry run creek. And staff has put several conditions, or advised for several conditions of approval that would ensure that that be platted in a timely manner and that the area be executed in order for it to be considered creditable. That was a critical part of the conversation and a kind of personal passion of my own, where when you dedicate a space for communal use, it needs to be able to be used by that community. And dedicating areas that are inaccessible or that are insufficient size to actually be engaged with by the members of that community really does a disservice to that area. And so that's why staff has advised several conditions of approval to ensure that those are usable and those are available for the community, and those actually get executed and completed. We want to make sure that if we're going to allow for these things, that the community gets something out of it, and staff believes that those conditions and can facilitate this type of unique amenity that many neighborhoods do not have. They do not have this kind of creek that they can engage with, cross over, and have a kind of little area to be away from the hub, the busyness and the activities of life and everything like that.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
These have come up before, so is this just specifically used for this subdivision, or anyone in the city of Georgetown could use this?
I would have to speak to the applicant as to
Okay.
how they are going to manage that. It is staff's stance that this should be usable for all, for any kind of neighborhood, but ultimately it'll be the determination and the statement of the applicant that will finalize if that is accessible
Okay.
for all of the community.
Thank you.
I've also pointed out in the north townhome areas, which is kind of this space here, this open area. At this point in time, the applicant proposes the retention of several trees in that area as much as possible, as well as the planting of some new ones that I'll point out when we get to the landscape plan. And it is in the center of the area. It does kind of offer this pocket of undevelopedness that can help filter some noise, filter some light, kind of have this naturalized area for the community to utilize. We've not identified it as a sinkhole area or something that would not really make it usable. And so staff believe that that can be a very vital piece of the the open space pie, we'll call it. The other area is another unique facet of this community in this proposal. It is this community center. They show several courts, a pool, a building itself. However, a lot of the details of it haven't been finalized, such as building areas, heights, the metric used for parking, a lot of other kind of nitty-gritty things that I find fascinating and interesting and important that you have. It's not just a small little thing in the corner that collects dust. It actually is something that is utilized. And so this is not something that we see very often. And so staff is intrigued by it being provided and being shown at this point in time, but would like to see a development plan filed with the Planning Commission office to ensure that it meets all the requirements of the ordinance. It is executed, it has that kind of expectation. And several conditions of approval are also added specifically in the development plan on the creation and the operation of it in order to allow for it to be actually used. Again, if it is just a plan that is on a piece of paper that does not actually get executed, that does no community any good, it's not usable. It's the usability that really is critical to the exchange of open space for development flexibility. So staff is very interested in it. The applicant can speak a little bit more to the logistics of it. I believe there may be a condition of approval about the accessibility of it, so who can utilize it, those types of things. But again, I'm going to let the applicant speak to the logistics of how they'll manage that property. This slide here is now getting into landscaping. I've utilized several colors to indicate different landscaping requirements. The blues along the north and south are an agricultural buffer requirement, and the pink shown west of the apartments and the kind of lighter blue shown north of the apartments are the two property perimeter landscaping requirements. The area along the north side is for non-accessing arterials. When you don't have a driveway on it, you should screen around it just because you're not utilizing it, just to kind of add that additional augmentation of a site. And they do satisfy that requirement for trees. They will have to satisfy that requirement for hedges to kind of screen from the neighbors to the north. It'll be a 6-foot-tall fencing or 6-foot-tall buffer requirement that will have to be continuous along that Birdseye Boulevard area. And then the area to the west of the apartments are a 10-foot wide buffer area for multifamily residential zones developed for 3 or greater family occupancy adjoining single-family zones, and for that to have a 6-foot-tall continuous buffer and 1 tree per 40 feet. They do reflect that on their plan. I believe this one will show it a little bit better. Again, I put the line over it for catching your eye for certain, but they do show that requirement and they do have that screening. Preliminary grading may also kind of help additionally with that screening, but I will let the applicant speak to their expectations and plans for their engineering. The applicant has requested a waiver to the agricultural buffering requirements. Noah spoke very eloquently to it in his presentation, but I'll just quickly remind you that the landscape and land use buffers ordinance requires a 50-foot tall buffer area along the property perimeter landscaping for all residential zones which adjoin an agricultural zone, and for those areas to be populated for 1 tree per 40, planted 35 feet from property line, as well as an installation of a minimum 6-foot tall diamond mesh or equivalent no climb along property boundaries. The north and south boundaries are agriculturally zoned. However, the property to the south is a school site, and so that does not have that traditional agricultural activity unless you count the growth of young minds, it's not really having that traditional agricultural function. I really expected a little bit more of a chuckle, so.
That was really good.
Good, thank you.
Next
Thank you.
level.
Wake her
Delayed reaction, sorry.
I really workshopped that one this morning, but that's okay.
Is that AI
You
involved
should
at all?
have put the joke.
It's not
earlier.
AI.
No,
I
no
should have. I do apologize for the timing issue, but in both of those instances along the north and south, there are already houses that are put in under a previous regulation and a different width requirement, which can be best articulated in this USB landscape buffer detail. When the agricultural buffers ordinance came into play in 2023, it replaced that requirement in favor of having that larger setback, that no climb fence, and that additional tree as an offset planting. For the lots along the south side, the single family ones and the multifamily townhome areas, they'd like to just continue that landscaping to the floodplain boundary, which would be that natural end of that area. And staff recommends or advises in favor of that waiver request, as it would have that continuous thing. There would be no kind of major deviation along that boundary, and that the growth of young minds is not considered in our agricultural definition.
We'll have to stop.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure, I did as a test, I only got one. But anyway, so staff advises in favor of that request for the waiver on the south side. On the north side is kind of a combination waiver request. So for a portion of the lots on the continuation of the block that is being proposed along the north side, specifically identified in orange for lots 37 to 48, they'd like to continue that same buffer requirement as formerly approved or formerly allowable in that ordinance. Staff is in favor of that request, given the kind of site layout and the already existing buffering requirements. There are trees, there are bushes, and everything else like that, and staff believes that that is kind of a natural continuation as opposed to an abrupt kind of jut out for an additional 50 feet, and then that new tree planting requirement. Staff will need to do several on-site visits to make sure that the fencing is going in as it should be and everything is constructed appropriately, but staff does advise in favor of that waiver request. For lots 49 through 51, they are requesting, they're going to start offsetting it, so starting to increase it after that kind of road tag or tail connection there. So it'll be, I believe, 22 at the minimum, but it'll follow kind of a jagged, we'll use the word, kind of boundary. And that is informed by a stream of note, which follows from the dotted line here. It kind of goes in, crosses property lines just east of the proposed kind of tail end of this road, and then it will kind of bend itself all the way down to the C1 pocket before kind of getting into the floodplain. We do not want to see an impediment of that area, and the applicant has expressed the interest to not impede on the flow of that area. And so in addition to, or that requirement, like we have a 25-foot wide riparian requirement, and they'd like to have the boundary of the agricultural protective boundary kind of follow that, and then also put the trees along that, at the edge of that 25-foot from center line of that stream, just to kind of not impede upon the flow, get the intent of the ordinance in mind, and consider and proceed accordingly. Staff is in agreement with that request. It would protect that stream. It would get the point that it would follow the intent of the ordinance. For the area from 52 to 57, they would like to do the same, but they do not require that width consideration, because at that point in time, the stream is pretty offset from the property line. So they will naturally have to just be away from it already, so that buffer will actually be larger than would be required by the ordinance because of that stream riparian. However, they do want to put those trees along that boundary, just for that continuation of that kind of planting that would be installed on the 3 lots just east of the creek crossing, and staff is in favor of that request as well. After that point, the C1 zone piece here, as well as the areas which are not shown, which is that kind of bump out, those will all meet the requirements of the agricultural buffering of that 50-foot with the tree planting location. Do I have any questions on that one?
The fence is that part of the waiver?
The fence location, to staff's understanding, and I'll of course let the applicant speak to the details of their waivers. Staff's expectation is that fence would still be installed, and that would not be a waiver consideration, except for where that creek kind of crosses, where like they would have to take consideration for the creek that crossing, but otherwise it would be maintained along that north boundary. And the same thing for the south boundary. The requirement for the fencing is along the shared boundary. It's not along that 15-foot offset thing where it's kind of this no man's land strip. It just says keep what's there or improve what's there to meet the standard of the ordinance. Promise, we're almost done. All right, we'll continue if there's not anything else. Vehicle use area perimeter landscaping is required for the south and south townhomes and community center and the apartments along the Bird's Eye, Radler, all that kind of extension area where it joins. That's a screening requirement for all areas where a parking lot faces a road, so as to prevent that glare issue and that kind of perpendicular lighting kind of distracting drivers. And that meets all the requirements of our ordinance. Interior landscaping, the North Townhome area does not require it. However, the South Townhome area requires it, the apartment area and the community center area requires it. And at this point in time, the application or the requests satisfy the requirements of interior landscaping. The total post-development canopy is calculated on a steep scale depending upon the land use chosen. It's not a zone-specific thing, it's the activity-specific thing. So for the purposes of calculating it, the applicant has split it in between the single-family detached and then the multifamily, which includes the attached apartments and community center areas. Approximately 2.4% of the tree canopy shown is going to be preserved in the acreage identified as a single-family detached. For the ordinance, 12 additional 12% of additional landscaping is required at this point. They do show kind of the installation, and it's difficult to see on this screen, but it's easier to see on your guys' 11 by 17. They do show some like lot trees, so trees kind of following the natural area of the road, kind of going up on this area on both sides, and then kind of following all these little pockets and everything like that. Oftentimes we have some concerns as staff. We don't want to have those trees impede upon the utility easements. However, the applicant can speak to how the trees are going to stay out of those utility easements and make sure that they're placed in such a way that they don't cause any issues for those areas. If they cannot be put in those areas due to utility conflict, we'll just have to figure out an alternative route, and the applicant will have to work with staff to figure out the next step in order to maintain and satisfy those tree canopy requirements. 20% of the area identified as the single-family attached apartments and community center area is going to be retained, and as such, no additional plantings are required outside of that which would be required for their vehicle use area, property perimeter, all that other fun stuff that's by the letter of the ordinance. Ultimately, they'll end up having a 26.4% tree canopy coverage area when you take into those additional requirements. Okay, now I'm good. There are several very long findings that are included in your guys' staff report, but staff's ultimate conclusion is that the preliminary development plan is consistent with the zoning, and the concept plan is approved by the board in July of 2015. The number of dwelling units, building coverage, overall site density comply with the requirements of the R2 zone. As a PUD, this does get a little bit more flexibility in exchange for those community benefits, and staff finds that those are balanced in this instance, where we have those additional amenities, those accessibility features, which we sometimes do not often see, and it ultimately results in that open space of greater than 10% being preserved and available to the community members. All of the landscaping requirements are satisfied, the stormwater management as proposed, utility service, fire protection, are all being satisfied at this point in time. I will speak in a brief moment about a preliminary subdivision plat consideration, but they, at this point in time, do satisfy that. Of course, additional permitting and additional requirements are applicable. And the last item is that the subdivision layout, floodplain crossings, landscape details, fire access, other items must be finalized with the TRC. Again, changes had occurred between their preliminary subdivision plat submittal that was reviewed by TRC and their correction submittal, and staff believes it's appropriate to just cover all of our bases, make sure that all of our agencies that are involved in our processes are aware of those shifts in the interest of transparency and everything like that, and the applicant is agreeable to that condition of approval. As such, well, tonight we'll need two motions. We will need a preliminary development plan motion, so for the actual construction of a lot of the units, and then we will need the subdivision plat proposal and that approval and everything like that. A lot of the conditions are very similar to one another, so I will kind of run through them pretty quickly, and they are in greater detail in our staff report. Staff advises or recommends in favor of the Phase 3 preliminary development plan, subject to the 5 kind of waivers as grouped. And then condition 5 being the agricultural buffer, which has specific call-out conditions in detail in the conditions of approval, which is how we get so many. The typical items are the zoning ordinance compliance, conditions of approval for the PSP and ZMA, conditions 3 through 11, probably about 11 and 12 is where we start to see those unique conditions. So receive all permits for floodplain areas, species-specific landscape plan, that's pretty typical. Conditions 14, 15, 16 are the ones specific to the required tree canopy or tree planting requirements for the agricultural protection and agricultural buffering ordinance. Condition 17 is just making sure that we get that cul-de-sac review. That's the one kind of area that the fire department is going to be the most interested in our opinion, as well as their hydrants and everything else that's fire-related. So we will be working with them.
Excuse me, I'm
Yes.
sorry. What number was that?
That is condition number 17,
Okay, thank you.
which is on page 15. It's the first full one on
Yeah.
page 15.
Thank you.
Conditions 18 through 22 have to do with their open space and with their community center.
Way too.
Open spaces need to be platted. Community center needs to be at least available for all residents of Woodland Park neighborhood, including all types of housing. The minor development plan submitted for the community center and the Dryland Creek Trail and low flow crossing need to be submitted, just making sure that we know what the locations are, what the materials are, make sure that it's not going to impede on anything. A certificate of occupancy shall be received for the community center prior, at or before the point that 2/3 of the apartment units have received their certificate of occupancy. Staff believes that this condition will ensure that that area is at least built and ready to go. If the hours of operation have not been determined or what the logistics are, that's independent of our consideration. We would just like to see that area become accessible and have that certificate of occupancy, have that usability confirmed with that CO, and that 2/3 is an appropriate benchmark to say, now we need this open. Condition 22 is just ensuring that the Dryland Creek is much of the same. So at the 2/3 apartment CO achievement, we'll need that crossing for the low flow and the trail and everything else like that put in. Okay, for the preliminary subdivision plat, same waivers apply, same conditions up until 12, 13, 14 will need to be identified. Condition 15 is the one that I had mentioned in the beginning was the change. Previously, it stated the final subdivision plat. That created a little bit of confusion, and staff and the applicant agreed to change the condition of approval, or yes, the condition of approval to say the corrected preliminary plat. It just was a timeline thing, just making sure that we use the right nomenclature, and I got it wrong the first time around, so we have it better this time. Cul-de-sac is the number 16, and then all open spaces are platted is condition 17. Is there anything for me?
I don't think I've ever seen this many recommendations on it
It is,
since I've been here.
I want it to be thorough, as seen by the 16-page staff report.
Yes, indeed.
It is staff's opinion that as the PUD, we hold you to a higher expectation for your open space. And so, well, many of these conditions of approval have to do with that, as well as just detailing the logistics of the agricultural buffering location placement, what they can do, what they can't do in those instances. So I just wanted to be very clear on the expectations of
Thank
this
you.
board and of staff.
Thank you.
I was glad to see lots 59 through 57 with the trees being emphasized, because Scott County bases a lot on waterways, and if we could protect our waterways from the start, prevent anything happening later on.
Yes, we agree wholeheartedly in that one. I'd love to see all the trees kept, but sometimes trees have to go, and it's just the way things are. So when we can put them in a smart place that doesn't harm anybody else, we like to see them put in.
Any additional questions for staff or comments? Is that a question?
Nope.
I think it was just a comment, not related to this. It was about
Okay.
his need for something. Any questions for staff? Can you give us 10 minutes? Okay, all right. Okay, applicant? You can step out if you want, we still have quorum. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm Dick Murphy, and I'm pleased to be here tonight representing the owners of the property, Urban Group. With me tonight is Kevin Rich, a landscape architect from Rich Design. Diane Zimmerman is with us as well. And I will not, Ms. Ketz has done a very thorough job going over our application on it. And I'm not going to go over it in as much detail as she did. I'm going to try to give you a little explanation on some of the highlights that we have. As she mentioned to you, we're in the R2 PUD zone, which, as you all know, is different from the R2 zone. Because the only difference, though, is that in the PUD zone, you're allowed to use different dimensional standards subject to your approval on a development plan. So it's specifically contemplated in the R2 PUD that there will be waivers, because that's what the zone is for. And that's what we're before you tonight, to go over the waivers we've asked for. There were a number of waivers on phases 1 and 2, and we're asking for, many of these are just asking for those to be continued forward on this plan. We have some new ones relating to the apartments and the townhomes as well. You all saw most of this. I know there's a new member on the commission, but most of you saw this 6 months ago when the zone change came before you. We had a conceptual development plan at that time, and the plan you see tonight follows what we showed on the conceptual development plan. We've refined it down, and I want to thank the staff very much. We've had a number of meetings with them over the last few months to work out the issues here, and the staff will say, why don't you do this? And we'll say, yeah, we think we can, and we'll move things a little bit around. And what you're seeing is the final product of that. So I want to thank the staff very much for the time and the detailed effort they have put in going over our plan. So I'm going to concentrate on the waivers that Ms. Ketz explained to you. There are basically 3 categories of waivers. The first are the ones that carry forward from phases 1 and 2. What we're asking you to do on the setbacks and side yards and rear yards are the same ones we have in phase 1 and 2. So basically, we're asking to do the same type of development. We want to keep it consistent in our phase 3 for the single-family detached homes. We're also asking for equivalent setbacks on the townhomes and apartments, but we want to make our single-family equivalent to the single-family in phase 1 and phase 2. The second category is the agricultural buffering, and if you could pull up one of the, there you go, one of the slides that relate to the agricultural buffering, and if I could borrow that pointer, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. A lot of these relate to the fact that the road here, which is Stargazer Drive. Stargazer Drive is constructed to this point, so it's in the ground. And we had always planned these single-family lots along here on the original plan, but it's here. And when we got phases 1 and 2 approved, we did not have the 50-foot buffer requirement. So to meet the fifth, we meet it down here. So we got to get, we have to get from this point gradually down. So you can see as we go down, the lots get deeper. The lot 48 here is much deeper than 41 is. And it keeps going down to the point where we don't need the buffer. So it's just because we have to continue Stargazer Drive down, and we have to move it down gradually. So that's really the reason behind the request for the waiver on the agricultural buffers. We are not asking for any waiver of the fence. The fence is going to be exactly the way it should be. No waiver whatsoever on the fence. The third part of the waivers is the apartment buildings. And I mentioned to you, and it's the height of the apartments and the number of units. And as Ms. Ketz mentioned, we want to group these units together. It keeps more green space open, and it amounts to less impervious surface. I mentioned to you at the workshop on Monday, I mentioned to you that the first floor of these apartment buildings would not be visible from the property to the west. And I wanted to make sure that I was accurate on that. So I asked Kevin to do us a cross-section. And if I can, may I come up and hand that out to you all? I just,
It is.
pass it down there. We wanted to make sure what we told you was accurate. So I asked Kevin, and I'll just wait till that goes down to the end of the table there.
Just to make sure, while we're passing these around, Mr. Murphy, I'm clear. So the waivers 1, 3, and 4 are carryover. 2 and 5 are new. Is that accurate? So 2 is the increased height on the apartment buildings, and 5 is the agricultural buffer.
Okay, I'm going to have to look at which.
Is that correct?
Which are you?
That 1, 3, and 4 are the carryover waivers from phases 1 and 2. Waiver 2 and 5 are the new ones, correct?
Are you looking at this?
I'm looking at 13, page 13. The PDP waivers.
So, yeah, 2, 4 are the carryovers, 1, 2, 5.
Say that again?
So 3 and 4,
Uh-huh,
those are, those are the setbacks for the side and rear.
Right.
or For the front and rear, those are identical to the previous.
3 and 4 are identical.
Yes.
Okay,
And then 1, 2 are apartment specific, so they were not considered.
right.
the
And then 5,
And then 5 has to do the agricultural
Yep.
buffers, which is based
Okay.
on the new ordinance.
got it. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Murphy.
Oh, no problem. On the cross-section I handed out, on the left side that comes up toward Cincinnati Road, US 25, we've got a little person there, not because they're going to be standing in the middle of US 25, but just to give you the scale of what a person would be standing there. Then we go over to the right, you can see the property goes up in the middle of the property, and then it goes down. And after it goes down, I've got this is the first floor, that's the first floor of each of the apartment buildings there. And you can see that each one of them is below the grade immediately to the left of those trees on there. So I just wanted to double check what I told you Monday, and it's true, as you can see. Our first floor of all our apartment buildings is lower than the grade immediately to the west over here on it. So I just wanted to show that to you about the topographic situation on the property. I wanted to point out that if we've got one that shows the development as a whole here. There we go. I just want to point out too that along all the boundaries, the entire north boundary, we're keeping those as single-family detached. On the bottom, you can see we have single-family detached. Over here, we have a few, two townhouses joined together, single-family townhouses joined together around here. But we're keeping predominantly single-family around all the boundaries on the property. Our apartments are in the middle. Townhouses, as you can see, are located here and there. And as Ms. Ketz mentioned, we had discussed the parking a little bit in the workshop, and I wanted to discuss that too. We had based our parking on the zoning ordinance. I think it's section 2.71C of the zoning ordinance, which calls for in multifamily apartments, 1 1/2 spaces per one-bedroom apartment and 2 spaces for 2-bedroom apartments. That's what we had done on this, and we meet those requirements. And we discussed that with the staff, and Ms. Ketz reported to you that staff agrees with our calculations. But they did ask me to explain a little bit what the parking plan for this property is. The applicant operates another complex, and what they plan to do here is that they will have, when you go to rent an apartment, if you want a 1-bedroom apartment, you automatically get 1 parking pass. You have to put the sticker on your windshield or your bumper. So you get 1 pass if you rent a 1-bedroom apartment. If you rent a 2-bedroom apartment, you get 2 passes if you want them. Not everybody has 2 cars in a 2-bedroom apartment. They have some people who single will rent a 2-bedroom apartment, want to use the other bedroom as a home office. These days, that's more and more common. But if they want to, they can have 2. Now, we're calculating this on the basis of 1 1/2 per 1-bedroom and 2 per 2-bedroom. We have a few people who want another parking space. If they're a 1-bedroom, they may ask for 2. That's more common of asking for an extra one. If you're in a 1-bedroom, you ask for 2 sometimes. And they have extra here, because we're calculating 1 1/2 per 1-bedroom, that they will have available for those who ask. Now, what happens if they don't have any left, and they're going to be saving some for visitor parking as well? If they don't have enough, if you say, I want to rent a 2-bedroom, but I want a 3rd pass for some reason, and they don't have it, they will just say, we don't have it. If you want to park 3 cars, you probably need to look someplace else on it. You will have to pay extra for the extra pass. You don't have to pay anything for the 1-bedroom or 2 for the 2-bedroom. Those are included in the rent, but you have to pay extra to get an extra pass. So they wanted me to explain the parking situation to you, and that's what it is. There is extra room on this property for additional parking if ever needed, but.
Is the visitor parking within the tenant parking, or?
Yeah, I don't know if they'll be marking that off as separate or not. I mean, they haven't got that far down the road with it as yet on it. And let's see if there's anything else I wanted to. Yeah, as Kevin has whispered to me, we also have overflow parking at the community center.
Oh.
Right here. Quite a number of parking spaces right there, which are right adjacent to the apartments. And there, we've got overflow parking there. So anyway, that's where we're at, and we appreciate you seeing both of these at the same time. We agreed with the staff that we'd bring the preliminary plat back to the technical review committee because technically they have not seen that, even though it's identical to the development plan. But we didn't see a need to take the preliminary development plan through you tonight with all these waivers. And then you have the same hearing a couple of months from now on the preliminary plat on that. So we appreciate hearing them both at the same time because they do totally agree with each other, the plat and the development plan. So anyway, that's where we're at, and hope I've given a little more information and be happy to answer any questions y'all might have.
Any questions for the applicant?
I've got one.
Yes, sir.
On the green space and the crossing, I assume, bridge, I guess, or that drive on the creek, who takes care of that? Is that a HOA deal, or is that something you all want to maintain?
That would most likely be the HOA, the same one that runs the community center. We're going to have the swimming pool and community center and all that stuff, so we'll have to have a HOA or something running that. So it'll be probably the same group. Kevin nodded and said yes, that runs that. We'll have it's a low flow crossing into the other side of the creek there. Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I got one. At any point, did you all consider the possibility of students maybe trying to walk to the schools that are adjacent to the south? Is there going to be any sort of sidewalk? And this might have been discussed before I got here, but I was just curious.
It was, and we had held that option open, and it has basically been rejected. I think it's because today's day and time, schools want total security
Yeah.
on it, and so that was a possibility, but it's not being followed up.
Sure thing.
Yeah, Commissioner Black, if I may, that was actually recommended by staff and discussed with the developer at time of zone change to allow for that access. However, we received feedback at that meeting from members of the public who happened to work at the school that there were some real concerns about limited access onto the campus and then limited access leaving the campus as well. And so in further discussions with the school board, while they said they'd love to have kids walk to school, at this point, integrating that connectivity would be more of a burden than it would be a benefit to the school district.
Gotcha. Good enough.
Any additional questions for the applicant? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the audience? Mr. Holm, come up and state your name and address.
Dan Holman on 503 South Broadway Street. So yeah, I was also thinking that question.
on there?
Oh, I didn't, see, I swear and affirm. Yeah, I hadn't planned to talk, but the question about the schools was something that I was also thinking about, and that's interesting that question came up before. So that's sort of disappointing that they can't get in there. Was that was mainly the school district? Yeah, so that just seems disappointing that we.
We're prepared to do that, residents of the community.
For what reason did they give in general?
Mr.
Or
Holden, you said likely security or?
Well, so from the school's perspective.
Or from the
it's primarily-
residents'
Yeah.
perspective?
Now, the residents had a couple different comments, and the board may recall. I don't want to misrepresent the viewpoint of the entire community, but at least one concern that we heard was actually related to the security of the residences along that border. There's concerns about students walking through backyards and trespassing and things along those lines. At the time of the zone change, it was discussed to basically have a dedicated trail or pathway through. And so I know that the applicant considered that. The community was more concerned, what happens if somebody doesn't do what's on the plat or follow the path that was outlined?
Yeah, so, yeah, it would be nice to. So one question, just coming up and down 25, like what if someone did want to walk? They basically, like some kids might have to walk in some cases, I don't know. I get, if you're going up and down 25, could something be worked out where there's a sidewalk on, to allow them to do that? Or would you be open to that? If the school would also do a sidewalk on their portion?
On Cincinnati?
Or is that too late? On Cincinnati Road? If I could.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, somebody has to walk out.
They walk out,
Hang a loogie on Cincinnati and then come back down.
just come down, yeah.
I don't know, Ben, I mean, is that a state road?
Yeah, so that is a state road. Again, I'll let Ben speak from an engineering perspective, but from a planning perspective, without significantly modified infrastructure and really creating a safe pathway for pedestrians, that intersection between motorists and particularly small children walking to school can be very dangerous. Staff was very much in favor of that interconnected neighborhood approach. Just a raw sidewalk on the side of 25, I don't know if that would be, from a planning perspective, best practices. Ben, do you have anything from engineering?
I would just say that first part up by 25, there is some open space up there. It is part of the HOA of Woodland. If the school wanted to work with the HOA, there's probably a solution that would keep people out of the right of way. And it could possibly, but that would be up to the school to want that connection. There is not really a physical connection.
And I do know that the magistrates and judge executive have talked over time about the desire to have a walking path down 25 going north, but I don't know that they've, there's not been steps taken to this point for the easement acquisition and things like that to make it happen.
In the Bird's Eye and Rattler, they both have sidewalks per our regulations, so the sidewalks do approach that intersection with Cincinnati Pike. But again, along that area at the point of time when phases 1 and 2 were put in, that was not under consideration, so we would have to
Yeah.
Holden Estate, we'd have to rework with HOAs and do a different kind of approach to try to see about doing that, which is outside of the purview of this specific phase of development.
So yeah, that seems, that, just as a community, that would be a good goal, especially because high school kids, I mean, kids walk up and down 25 from the school. I say, you know, so you, sometimes you'll see them just on the
Right.
side of the road. It's not, so that would be great as a community
sure.
goal to
Yeah.
get sidewalks. One other quick question, was there was some question I remember, I heard this about street trees. Did you all get all the street trees you all had originally wanted, or, it's because this is called Woodland Park, so you might expect, I don't know if that was a goal in the,
Yeah, no, so there is not a specific street tree ordinance that you want me to.
Sure, yeah, if you could come to the microphone, that'd be great.
I'll sit down, and
Yeah.
thank you.
So we originally had street trees shown, but there isn't a specific street tree ordinance in Georgetown, in part because of the way that the utilities like to run their utility easements. And so what we've done is we've essentially just slid the trees out of the right-of-way and deeper into the lots. So we call them lot trees, I think, on the plan. So at maturity, it will have a similar feel, right? You know, but that's
Yeah, we
how
talked about it a little bit at the workshop, that some of the concern was over time as the trees grow and mature. And then the utility easements are right there as well, that they can cause problems from a root structure standpoint with the
So there
utility
is-
easements.
but should there maybe be a more refined street tree ordinance for the?
Well, it's at least went over, we exceed the canopy, tree canopy requirements for the project. Some of that is through lot trees and other tree canopy.
Or just, like, since you said there wasn't a specific ordinance, like, would the staff think that maybe that is something that should be refined, or is it good as is?
For street trees, it does get really complicated with how utilities and trees and everybody kind of fights for the same kind of, I would call it a tree lawn with local lingo for me, but that utility strip between the road and the sidewalk, there's a lot of kind of space arguments for that. And so utility companies have really pushed against those being in that location. If we are directed by the Planning Commission Board or by any of our legislative bodies to review and start taking into consideration to have a street tree requirement, that's at your guys' purview, that's at the legislative body's purview. The city of Lexington, I believe, does have a street tree ordinance. I don't speak a lot with the developers in that area, so I can't speak to the ease of usability or the conflicts, the challenges that they face with it. But it is not uncommon to see one. It is just, it's very difficult kind of balancing of the interests of the utility company, the maintenance responsibility, and then also the effectiveness of that tree. Does that tree survive? Does that tree disrupt everything? What's that cost to public infrastructure 10, 20 years down the line when the tree reaches maturity and starts taking out lines and sidewalks and causing issues for houses and that type of thing? So if the board feels so inclined to request that we start doing some research, happy to start doing that work. But at this point in time, we don't have an ordinance that would require it. But it's always an option. So in this instance, if the applicant can fit it in, then we'll see them put in. If they can't fit in and it ends up negatively impacting their tree canopy percentage to the point where they need to find alternative locations for them, we'll work with the applicant to figure out where the best places could be for that going forward.
Any other comments, questions for the applicant?
I just want to applaud the developers. It's obviously y'all put a lot of thought into walkability, quality of life in the neighborhood. I mean, multiple open spaces, the community center. I'm hoping this is a model that we see more of come before us on the commission. So credit to you guys.
Go ahead. Final call for any comments or questions? Okay, reminder that we do need 2 actions on this. First for PDP 2025-67, which is the development plan, and then for PSP, which is the subdivision plan. So, do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve PDP 2567.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Black. Second?
Second.
All right. Mr. Black?
Yes.
Ms. Canfield?
Yes.
Mr. Jesse?
No.
Mr. Vest?
No.
Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Garrett?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
No.
Okay, the chair votes yes, so the PDP passes. All right. Now for the subdivision plat, PSP 2025-37. Have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve PSP 2025-68
Okay.
based on staff recommendation.
I'll second.
All right. Mr. Black?
Yes.
Ms. Canfield? Mr. Jesse?
No.
Mr. Vest? Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Garrett?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
No.
Mr. Garrett absent. Chair votes yes, so motion carries. All right, you want to come up and sign?
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Now, discussion on the rural cluster development ordinance, which I think we have a revised copy of it as well, correct?
Yeah, yeah. Some mobile.
Soldier. Did you hear me? Who's gonna be the lead?
I'm drinking a lot of water.
Okay.
All right.
Guys, we're nearly there. This can be as brief or as long as you guys want it to be.
We know what we vote.
All right, so I'll be quick about it then. For a couple months now, we've been discussing potential changes to our what would be our first accessory housing ordinance for unincorporated Scott County. And then, as well as we've been discussing updating regulations related to rural cluster development ordinances. The big takeaway on this is last year, we had a series of meetings with an agricultural stakeholders group, of which Dan Holman attended quite a few of those meetings. From the planning perspective, one of them being, how do we come up with a variety of options for developers that, in the long run, could help preserve farmland? And so these are the two kind of ideas that got the most traction from a planning perspective. The first is accessory housing. Already, we have an ordinance that allows for secondary residences with basically when you have multiples of 5 acres. As you guys, I'm sure, are aware, Scott County has a minimum lot size in the agricultural zones of 5 acres. So if you've got 5 acres, you can have a house. If you got 10 acres, you can apply for a conditional use permit and get another house. 15 continues on up. This accessory housing ordinance would be a little bit different. If you have a legal lot of record, essentially in Scott County, and you can put on an accessory housing structure that is 50% or smaller than the primary dwelling, and you can meet some of the other design and development regulations, we can get you another house, give you a little bit more flexibility. Understanding, of course, that you're going to live on the property and that accessory housing unit is not going to be used for short-term rentals. If we're allowing this flexibility, it needs to be a real direct benefit to the residents of Scott County. And so I'm just going to pause for a second. If there's any specific feedback for the accessory housing ordinance, we'd love to hear it. If not, it's my hope to have a public hearing on this topic at the February Planning Commission meeting. Any feedback for accessory housing? That means we're doing a good job. Commissioner Jesse, I'll jump ahead on you. The intent in this is that we're going to allow types of structures that are designed for permanent habitation. Whatever that is, whether that's modular or stick-built or whatever, however we can meet that. If it's designed for permanent habitation, we need to allow people to do that. We don't want to put in so many barriers or hurdles or specific design standards that it's not taken advantage of. It's not a silver bullet, but it should be something in our repertoire.
I thank you for the work that all of you all have done, including the community that showed up for that. And this just enables us to help some people in this community that need help with more housing. And hopefully the city moves forward and looks at this as well. So I salute the hard work that you all have done over many months of work, and so I salute you for it.
That's greatly appreciated.
How many, if I can ask, how many members of the community have been involved in the discussion to this point? Has it
Up to
been an
this point, I
active
mean,
topic?
those agricultural stakeholder meetings were very successful. I mean, we had some meetings with 30, 35,
Yep.
probably close to 40 people. I'll kind of, I shouldn't have buried the lead. The reason we're talking about this tonight, though, is next week we plan to have another large-scale community meeting at the Scott County Library where we're inviting the public to attend and give specific feedback on these two ordinances. Mark, could you help me out? What is the time on that?
5 to 7.
It's 5 to 7 on January the 13th. 15th. See? Good catch. You got it.
And that'll be on the Facebook page, so we
Yes,
can share it.
it'll be on the Facebook page. We're working on the flyer right now. And we should be advertising in the newspaper as well. Is that correct? Work in progress. Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, members of the commission are certainly invited, but we need to make sure we also don't have a quorum of the commission there?
Well, so.
Concern raised in the past.
It is a public event.
Okay.
Everybody is welcome to attend.
Okay, all right.
If there is a quorum there, you cannot conduct commission business.
Okay.
Just stay
The
away
short
from
of
each
it,
other.
don't talk to each other. Yeah, yeah.
I don't like them anyway. I'm just
Elsewhere,
kidding.
you know,
After tonight.
guys, if you ever all find yourselves at a Reds game together, make sure you're not sitting one by one.
Okay.
Okay? So, yes, we are all more than welcome to attend. You're even welcome to give feedback as residences and to listen to the constituents here. I'll quickly move ahead to the rural cluster development ordinance. The one that you had received in your packet had some formatting issues, so I've given you a new copy of it. They're substantially the same. This is just a cleaner copy. This is the one we plan to share at the community event. The big takeaway in this is the adoption of a couple different things. Number one, it is the requirement that in a cluster development, 50% of the acreage is preserved for agricultural use. This, I think, is very important because the state intent of the agricultural stakeholders group was to preserve farmland. This puts a number on it. As you guys are aware, with a standard 5-acre subdivision, the amount of preserved acreage is 0. With this, we get something out of it.
50%.
The other major change with this compared to what was previously adopted actually has to do with the applicable lot sizes. Moving forward, our hope and our intent is that in working with the health department, if they can identify suitable septic locations in advance, then we can get those acreages smaller. We don't want planning to be the barrier behind that. If there's another regulatory body that believes that it can't be done, it's not going to be planning. Planning is taking very much, if we can, then we should provide this option. And so we're allowing it all the way down to half an acre. There's going to be somebody who says you can't fit a septic system on half an acre. That may be true, but we're going to let the health department and the soils decide that, not this regulation. That lot size could go all the way up to 2 acres. 2 acres is what's already entertained in the existing rural cluster development regulations.
So we're totally different.
The other thing that I believe should be up for consideration is in creating preserve tracts. We make sure, number one, that we preserve a development unit for that preserve tract. What we don't want to do is have a preserve tract that can't be built on. Everyone builds around it, everyone neglects that, and then the county gets stuck with a property that isn't getting its property tax paid, and there's no development potential left on it. Basically, then the county gets a bunk spot, not what we're trying to do. And so we're going to preserve that development right for that property. We can provide one house on it. But then past that, right now, the language, and this is still page 1, paragraph B, is the preserved acre tracts may be no smaller than 10 acres. That number came about with conversations with people who have tried to go through the cluster development process before. I'm still not convinced that 10 acres is the final answer for Scott County. What 10 acres does is it says that if a parcel is 20 acres or greater, it could qualify for this cluster development, because 10 would get developed and 10 would be preserved. It might make more sense for that number to go to 20, but just realize then that only parcels greater than 40 acres or above could be developed. Myself and Mr. Shirley actually did some research on previously approved cluster developments, and really what's been previously approved in Scott County has been relatively large acres and large tracts. We're talking 60, 70, upwards of 100 acre developments. And so in that case, they're easily going to meet that 10-acre minimum. But do we need to increase it so that we're avoiding small clusters? Again, the smaller that preserve goes, the less real agricultural preservation potential that it's providing. And so we'll dial that in. If there's any specific questions, I would ask you to go ahead and provide those. Otherwise, just come out next Thursday to the library, and then you can just be a part of the conversation there.
Has there been any conversation that, I'm playing devil's advocate here, obviously, the larger, with the idea of the preserve area, preserving agricultural land, has there been any conversation about the 50% threshold potentially in the bigger scheme of things limiting preserved agricultural land? Because while in that area it has 50% reserved, at least in theory, it also means more development in other places because houses aren't built on 50% of the land. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. So what I would say is what this particular development regulation has proposed, though, actually allows a higher density of development through the cluster than you would get from a standard 5 acre.
Yeah, sure.
And so that was in the past something that did not exist.
Yeah.
And so a developer would end with the same number of lots where they did a cluster with higher barriers and more requirements.
Right.
Or standard subdivision.
Right.
And so that obviously pushed most everybody to do standard subdivisions. We are essentially presenting an opportunity to get more lots, take more demand, and provide more units to market, with the then benefit to the public being that we're going to preserve that acreage. And so, again, is every development in Scott County going to be a cluster from now on? No. But could we get a few more? We're really hoping to. The other thing I'm going to just kind of talk about for a second is that each cluster development would require a rezone to the A5. That is an existing requirement. That would be a requirement moving forward. What that rezone does is allows us to take a look at the infrastructure in the area where the development is proposed. There's a lot of concern that if you put a bunch of lots out there and the road can't handle it, then you're going to create problems. That rezone step is our ability to review that, and you guys are going to see each and every one of those rezones. And so that allows, and as Mr. Perkins can tell you, there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of discretion that this commission is afforded at the time of the rezone. And so that still allows us to say, yes, it makes sense to do this cluster here, or no, it doesn't make sense because there's not enough water, there's an inadequate fire protection, there's not enough, whatever the list is. And so we're prepared to basically present on a case-by-case basis on these.
I do have a clarifying question for you.
Yeah.
Not really based on, it's just something you said earlier. So make sure I understand this. So if you have 5 acres currently, you can have 1 house. 10 acres is 2. So with every 5 acres, you can add another house, is that right?
With the conditional use permit,
Is there a
yes.
maximum number?
No, I don't believe there is. The thing that you're actually going to run into, and I'm going to look at my other planner staff on this, is it would actually have more to do with the number of houses being accessed by the driveway.
Okay.
And after you get over 3 houses, you have to meet county specs. Very few people are willing to build a road to county specs to get another house.
Okay. And then the second thing, you made a comment about the septic systems. And I have owned some property in Florida, and it is amazing in 2026, the septic, what we all have known in the past, it's all changed.
Yeah.
The capability of doing all kinds of things, septic-wise, is totally different now.
Yeah.
So a lot of these were, before you'd say wasn't possible, it absolutely is possible.
Yeah.
They're doing it
Glendon above-ground systems and all sorts of different
kinds of
things.
stuff, yeah.
What is contemplated here, though, is that we will make sure, regardless of what that final lot size is that they have enough room for both the primary as well as a 100% reserve. And so what we want to make sure is avoiding a situation where the county has to step in because of a real threat to health, life, or safety related to septic system failures. And so they should have plenty of room to move a septic system.
But the
Yeah.
technology
Oh, yeah.
today is amazing, what they can do with septics.
So what you're saying is, instead of the 5 acres, you're going to drop that down to 2? Is that?
No, down to
Yeah, you
Only for
could
cluster
drop it down to
development.
2 in a cluster.
in a rural cluster only.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Yeah, we are not messing with the
So you're not gonna see
standard.
a bunch of 2-acre lots for sale in Scott County.
Not unless it comes with 50% of the acreage being preserved for farmland in
But is-
perpetuity.
I kinda
Is 2 the minimum, or did you say down to half acre?
So that is, again, dependent on how you're gonna fit septic in there.
Yeah.
2 acres is the maximum for a cluster, half acre would be the minimum, and that cutoff point is actually 1.75 acres. If it's 1.75 or up to 2, they don't need to get pre-approved by the health department. They can just come through us and then go to the health department. If they want less than that, we're saying do your homework first, prove the site can support it, and then we'll consider it. So that would require site registrations in advance.
So you could buy a 5-acre lot, put 2 houses on it.
No,
No.
no.
You need to,
Now, what you could do.
you need to read it before next meeting.
What you could do is you could have your house on 5 acres and get an accessory dwelling unit that can't be sold off separate, can't be subdivided.
Gotcha.
So your
But could,
mother-in-law can move.
but could
into
give your brother a
5
spot to come and live,
But you could
as
have
brothers
40
tend to
That's what you
do.
want, right?
How fast?
You'd have a 40-acre
It's on
farm
record.
would give you 8 tracts, and you could put those 8 into as few as 4 acres, if it worked out half acre, or
Sure.
if it all worked, it's
Yeah,
possible.
now, if you got 40 acres, actually, 1 dwelling per 2 acre, you could do a lot, you do like 11.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so again,
Save all
it's,
that
we're
land.
offering something we
It's an-
haven't
it's an
offered
option.
before.
It's an option.
But,
Yeah.
Who
Yes.
owns the other acreage, though?
All right.
Okay.
Any other comments? Motion to adjourn?
if I may, one more thing. One more.
Just in time, under the wire.
So we had an over-under of 8:15. And
Hey!
we're, no, this is an actual question. Setting up for the new year, we have always previously provided printed packets to each member of the commission, just every single month. And looking at our budget and looking at trying to be a little bit more environmentally conscious, what we'd like to do is create an opt-in policy for you guys. If you want to receive a digital copy only, we'd like to provide you with that option. This is not pressuring you to give up, your paper packets. If you want a printed one, we'll continue to print them. But if you feel comfortable running an iPad or a laptop with a digital copy, we'd be happy to do that. You just let me or my staff know, and we'll basically just check a box for you. And that's something we're going to
There's
offer
a-
all the boards.
Is there electricity nearby to?
No, you have to charge
Yeah. My
Bring-
laptop's kind of a smaller one, so depending on, some of these meetings run long enough.
Sure.
Yeah.
You can always have additional.
There's one back here, just might be a trip hazard.
Back up.
And those types of things, as those one additional.
Oh, one second, let me.
The only thing, man, I just want you to consider this, you don't have to have the answer tonight. Like on these maps, if we could still get a copy, just that,
Okay.
because it's really hard to read that on the.
Yeah, 11 by 17 maps, that's
Yeah,
a good
if you-
point.
If you
Yeah.
could, that's the only exception I would ask you for.
Okay. Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Elise, did you have one more
I
thing?
do have one additional thing. With our timeline for production for paper packets, at times we are producing them the morning of Friday and then having to run around, take time away from our engineering techs, our planning staff to go off. I'd also like to kind of create an additional option of paper packet, but you pick it up at workshop. So you would read the PDF over the weekend and then you just pick it up at workshop. So you'd also like that. Like Melissa is oftentimes doing that. Her residence is particularly far out of the way. And so we save her packet for her. She comes by at workshop or comes by at the meeting, or in this instance, unfortunately, due to some flight issues, neither. You come by and you just pick it up at the workshop. So if you're comfortable from Friday to Sunday to Monday/Monday, to have the PDF, and then we don't have to run out to your site, you get it kind of immediately, you're comfortable with reading on it, and then you just get your paper thing, or you get your 11 by 17s that you'd prefer. I'd also like to leave that option open up for you guys.
We're here to serve you.
We're here to serve you. We're here to try to make it as easy as possible for you guys. But we also, if you guys could do us a solid, if you guys don't need it until Monday, but you're comfortable with the iPad reading at 2 a.m. as opposed to paper reading at 2 a.m. on Sunday night, just let us know as well for that one.
But we could pick up the map on Mondays.
Yeah, you can still pick up the map on Monday. We can, essentially, whatever you guys would like, we're happy to do it. But I guess Holden stated, in the interest of saving
Trees.
resources, gas time, staff time running out, 'cause it takes about 2 hours to do all the packets, 3 hours to do all the packets. In those interests, for maximum efficiency, if you guys are comfortable with it, just let us know.
It's a good idea.
All right. All right, motion to adjourn?
Second, go. Bye.